What if the moment you thought was just another episode was actually the end of everything you knew? What if the woman you have watched for years quietly made a decision that would erase an entire identity? And what if the cameras were the last thing to go in this story? Because today, we are breaking down the moment Janelle Brown stopped asking for permission, stopped performing for television, and started walking away from a life that no longer existed. And trust me, the most shocking part is not what she said, but what she finally stopped doing. For us, it really is just going before the leadership of the church and making kind of your request. And that single sentence quietly detonates everything that follows, because what we are watching is not just a woman asking for spiritual permission, but a woman standing at the edge of the life she once defended and finally admitting that it no longer exists. And as the episode opens, Janelle is sitting with Maddie, far from Arizona, far from the chaos, and far from the man who once defined her identity. And the distance matters because Maddie is not nostalgic. She's not romantic about the past. She sees it clearly. And when she calls the entire situation toxic, it lands heavy because it is the word that nobody wanted to say out loud for years. And the moment Maddie asks, what happens if the church does not release you? The silence that follows tells us everything. Because this is not about paperwork or ritual. This is about fear. The fear that even after everything, after abandonment, after emotional distance, after the fracture between a father and his children, the belief system might still hold her hostage. And Janelle admits that if they refused, it would cause a crisis of faith. And that confession is the real story here, because nothing about their current lives resemble the rules of the church they once followed. They do not live modestly, they do not practice privately, they do not isolate themselves from the world. They are fully immersed in it. Yet that final thread of control remains, and it is powerful enough to pull her back into a system she no longer lives by. And when she explains her reasoning, it is calm, measured, almost detached. She says they do not live together anymore. He has said openly that he wants to live with Robin, that he is in love with Robin, and that he is estranged from her children. And in that moment, she frames the end not as a betrayal, but as a fact pattern. And that matters because in this belief system, there are only a few doors out. And she is choosing abandonment because it is the truth and because it places responsibility exactly where it belongs. And this is where the tension starts to build, because while Janelle is quietly preparing to close a chapter, Kody is telling a completely different story, and his version shifts depending on who is listening. First, he claims he did not know, then he claims he did ask, then he claims he was told no, and every version contradicts the last. And the reason it matters is because releases are not just symbolic, they are judgments. And a release granted to a wife is a public acknowledgement that a husband failed. And Kody understands that humiliation better than anyone. And that is why the idea that he would not track this conversation is impossible. Because this is not a small detail. This is the kind of thing that challenges the very image he has tried to protect for decades. And when Janelle says she told him and that he did not care, it rings hollow because indifference has never been his strongest trait. And then there is the strange warning. He gives her that the church might tell her she cannot remarry outside the faith. And the question becomes, why would he care? Unless part of him still believes that this spiritual bond still benefits him, that in some unseen eternal ledger, these women still count. And that contradiction exposes everything. He says he is done with polygamy, yet he clings to the afterlife version of it. And this is where the story tightens, because the audience is watching two people exit the same relationship from completely different realities. Janelle is stepping away quietly, choosing peace, choosing distance, choosing clarity, while Kody is still negotiating power, control, and perception. And as the episode moves forward, the visuals attempt to suggest a formal process, shots of walking streets, of buildings, meant to imply authority, but even that feels performative, because the location does not match the reality. and it becomes another reminder that much of what we are shown is carefully constructed, while the real decisions happen off-camera. And that matters, because just as the show tries to dramatize closure, Janelle herself is pulling away from the entire production. And when she later posts on social media about kicking the cameras out of her life, it reframes everything we have just watched. Because suddenly, this episode is no longer just a storyline, it is a farewell. And her words are not angry or bitter, they are reflective, almost startled by the realization that so much of her identity had been shaped by what people thought they knew about her. And she talks about the quiet moments, the private heartbreaks, the pieces of herself she never had time to understand. And that admission is heavy, because it suggests that even as she was living this life, raising children, surviving conflict, and carrying responsibility, she was also performing a version of herself for the world. And when she says rebuilding takes time, it signals that the cameras leaving did not just remove pressure, they created space. And that space is dangerous and necessary, because it forces questions that were previously drowned out by schedules and storylines and expectations. And when she asks, "Who am I when nobody is watching?" that question echoes far beyond her, because it applies to every person who has ever stayed in a situation too long because it was familiar or profitable or publicly validated. And the suspense here is quiet but relentless, because the viewer realizes that this is not just about leaving a man or a marriage. It is about dismantling an entire framework of belief, fame, obligation, and identity. And the deeper you listen, the clearer it becomes that this process did not start when she went to the church, or when she spoke to Maddie, or even when she posted online. It started the moment the camera stopped rolling, and she was left alone with herself. And that is the moment no one can rush, no one can edit, and no one can control. And as this realization settles, the tension grows, because the show is still airing, her past self is still being consumed, analyzed, debated, while her present self is actively stepping away. And the gap between those two versions is where the real story lives. And the question that keeps pulling the viewer forward is not whether she got the release, because we eventually learn that she did. The real question is, what happens when the identity you lived in for over a decade disappears, and you are left to rebuild without an audience, without a script, and without the safety of being part of something bigger? And that unanswered question hangs over every scene, every confession, and every quiet moment, making it impossible to look away, because the ending has not arrived yet. It is unfolding in real time, and we are only seeing the very beginning. As the story continues, the weight of what Janelle is doing becomes heavier, because this is not just another separation storyline designed for ratings. This is the slow dismantling of a life that was built in layers of belief, duty, compromise, and survival. And while the cameras attempt to capture resolution, what they actually capture is resistance. The resistance of a woman who no longer wants to explain, justify, or perform her pain. And this is where the tension sharpens, because Kody begins to rewrite history in real time, and each version of his story feels less about truth and more about control. First, he claims he was unaware. Then he minimizes. Then he reframes himself as someone who already tried and was denied. And with each retelling, the responsibility drifts further away from him. And this pattern is familiar because it mirrors years of emotional deflection where accountability was always just out of reach. And the audience feels the frustration, because Janelle is not yelling, she is not pleading, she is not fighting for validation. She is simply stating facts, and that calmness is more unsettling than anger because it signals finality. And when she explains that her request is based on abandonment, it reframes the entire narrative of the marriage, because abandonment is not about physical absence alone. It is about emotional withdrawal, parental disconnection, and the deliberate choice to build a life elsewhere. And when she names that he has chosen to live with Robin, that he is emotionally invested there, that he is disconnected from her children, she is not accusing, she is documenting. And documentation is powerful because it removes debate. And the reason this matters so much in this belief system is because being released under abandonment is not neutral. It is a verdict, and it quietly acknowledges that a husband failed to uphold his responsibilities, and that reality threatens the image Kody has protected for years. And that is why his response feels defensive, scattered, and inconsistent, because the story is slipping out of his control. And while this unfolds, the show itself becomes part of the tension because it continues to package these moments as episodes, arcs, and cliffhangers, while Janelle is actively disengaging from the machine producing them, and her social media posts act as a counter-narrative to the edited footage because they reveal a woman who is already mentally elsewhere. She speaks about how people think they know you, how television offers a real version, but never the full one. And that distinction matters because it acknowledges that what viewers consumed for years was both true and incomplete. And that incomplete truth shaped public perception, shaped expectations, and even shaped how she saw herself. And when she says that after the cameras went away, she realized how much of her identity had been shaped by what people thought they knew, it exposes the hidden cost of visibility. And the suspense deepens here because the audience realizes that this exit is not loud, it is quiet and irreversible. And that is often the most powerful kind of ending. And then she speaks about rebuilding and how it is messy and beautiful at the same time. And those words carry weight because rebuilding suggests collapse, and collapse suggests loss. And yet she frames it without bitterness. And that choice makes the moment more compelling because it feels earned. And while she is processing this internally, the show continues to air moments from the past, creating a strange overlap where the audience is watching a version of Janelle that no longer exists. And that dissonance is uncomfortable because it forces the question of whether true healing can happen while the past is still being consumed, dissected, and monetized. And this is where the commentary becomes unavoidable, because as long as the show continues, the women are still tethered to the identity of sister wives, whether they want it or not. And that tether complicates healing, because it requires revisiting wounds for the sake of content and deadlines and production schedules. And that reality becomes even heavier when considering the depth of what Janelle has endured, including public marital collapse, family fractures, and unimaginable personal loss, all while those moments were packaged as entertainment. And this is where empathy enters, because regardless of choices made, no one is fully prepared to grieve in public. And when unpacking, still narrating her journey alongside a new marriage, and that contrast is important because it highlights that healing does not look the same for everyone. Christine is processing aloud, using the platform to confront what was hidden and expose what was normalized. And there is value in that, because it challenges long-standing narratives about polygamy and reframes them through lived experience. While Janelle appears to be choosing a different path, one that is quieter, more internal, less performative. And neither path is wrong, but they reveal different stages of recovery, and this distinction keeps the viewer engaged because it prevents a single storyline from dominating the truth. And then there is the uncomfortable realization that acknowledging harm does not require regret for children or life itself. And this is a nuance often lost in public discourse, because admitting that a system caused damage does not erase love or meaning, it simply tells the truth, and truth is often the final step before healing can begin. And the suspense here is not about what the church decided, because that answer exists. The suspense is about whether Janelle will one day fully name the system that shaped her, and whether she will allow herself to acknowledge not just personal pain, but generational impact. And that question lingers, because for many who leave high-control environments, the hardest part is not leaving. It is admitting that you were misled and that your children were affected. And that admission carries immense guilt and weight, and many never fully voice it. And as this realization settles, the story becomes less about reality television and more about identity, autonomy, and recovery. And the audience stays because they recognize pieces of themselves in this journey. The fear of starting over, the fear of being alone without structure, the fear of discovering who you are without roles, labels, or expectations. And that universal tension is what holds attention, because while this story is specific, its themes are not. And as Janelle steps further away from the cameras, the silence becomes louder, because silence is where reflection lives, and reflection is where truth waits. And that truth is still unfolding, and that uncertainty keeps the viewer watching, not for drama, but for resolution that feels real and earned and honest, even if it never fully arrives. In the end, this was never just about a release or a marriage or a church. It was about a woman choosing herself after years of being defined by everyone else. The cameras may still be rolling, but her story has already moved on. And while the show continues, the version of Janelle you are watching no longer exists, because the real ending is not loud, dramatic, or explosive. It is quiet, final, and powerful. And once someone walks away like this, there is no going back.